This is Mr. Hinton, and I am reading Confessions of a Shinigawa Monkey by Haruki Murakami. I met the elderly monkey in a small Japanese-style inn in a hot springs in Gunma Prefecture some 5 years ago. The inn was rustic, or more precisely, decrepit. It was barely hanging on, and I just happened to spend a night there. I was traveling around, wherever the spirit led me, and when I arrived at the hot springs town and got off the train, it was already past 7 p.m. Autumn was nearly over, the sun had long since set, and the place was enveloped in that special navy blue darkness specific to mountainous areas. A cold, biting wind blew down from the peaks, sending fist-sized leaves rustling down the street. I walked along the central part of the hot springs town searching for a place to stay, but none of the decent inns would take guests after the dinner hour had passed. I stopped by 5 or 6 places, but they all turned me down. And finally, in a deserted area outside town, I ran across an inn that would take me, that didn't include a dinner charge. It was a totally desolate-looking lodging, a ramshackle place that might best be called a flop house. The inn had seen many years go by, but it lacked all the charm you might expect from a quaint lodging of its age. Mismatched fittings here and there, ever so slightly slanted, as if slapdash repairs had been made. I doubted that it would make it through the next earthquake, and I could only hope that no tremor would hit that day, or the next. They didn't serve dinner, but breakfast was included, and the fee for one night was incredibly cheap. Inside the entrance was a simple reception desk, behind which sat a completely hairless old man, devoid even of eyebrows, who took my payment for one night in advance. The lack of eyebrows made the old man's largish eyes seem to glisten bizarrely, glaringly. There was a large brown cat, equally ancient, sacked on a floor cushion beside him. Something must have been wrong with its nose, for it snored louder than any cat I'd ever heard. Occasionally, the rhythm of its snores fitfully missed a beat. Everything in this inn seemed to be old, ancient, and falling apart. The room I was shown to was small, like a little storage area where they kept futon bedding. The light on the ceiling was dim, and the flooring under the tatami mat creaked ominously with each step. But it was too late to be particular, I told myself. I should be happy enough to have a roof over my head and a futon to sleep on. I put my large shoulder bag, my only luggage, down on the floor and set off for town. This wasn't exactly the type of room I wanted to lounge around in. I went into a nearby soba noodle shop and had a simple dinner. There weren't any other restaurants open, so it was that place or nothing. I had a beer, some bar snacks, and some hot soba. The soba was mediocre, the soup lukewarm, but again, I wasn't about to complain. It certainly beat going to bed on an empty stomach. After I left the soba shop, I thought I'd buy some snacks and a small bottle of whiskey, but couldn't find a convenience store. It was after 8, and the only places open were the little shooting gallery stalls typically found in hot springs towns. So I hoofed it back to the inn, changed into a yukata, and went downstairs to take a bath. Compared to the shabby buildings and facilities, the hot springs bath at the inn was surprisingly wonderful. The steaming bath water was a thick green color, not watered down, the sulfur odor more pungent than anything I'd ever experienced, and I soaked there, warming myself to the bone. There were no other bathers. I had no idea if there were any other people staying in the place besides me, and I was able to enjoy a long leisurely soak. After a while, I felt a little lightheaded and got out to cool off, then got back into the tub. Maybe this shoddy-looking little inn was a good choice after all, I figured. It was certainly more peaceful than bathing with some noisy tour group like in the larger ends. I was soaking in the bath for the third time when the monkey slid open the door with a clatter and came in. "Excuse me," he said in a low voice. It took me a while to realize that this was a monkey. All the thick, hot water had left me a little dazed, and I'd never expected to hear a monkey speak, so I couldn't quickly make the connection between what I was seeing and the fact that this was an actual monkey. My brain felt scattered as I gazed through the steam uncomprehendingly at the monkey, who slid the glass door closed behind him. He straightened up the little buckets that had lay strewn about and stuck a thermometer into the bath to check the temperature. He gazed intently at the dial on the thermometer. His eyes narrowed, like a bacteriologist isolating some new strain of pathogen. "How is the bath?" the monkey asked me. "It's very nice, thank you," I said. My voice reverberated densely, softly in the steam. My voice sounded almost mythological. It didn't sound like it came from me, but rather like an echo from the past returning from deep in the forest, and that echo was... Hold on a second. What was a monkey doing here, and why was he speaking in human language? "Shall I scrub your back for you?" the monkey asked, his voice again low. He had he had the clear, alluring voice of a doo-wop baritone, but not at all what you would expect. But nothing was odd about his voice, and if you closed your eyes and listened, you'd think it was an ordinary person speaking. "Yes, thanks," I replied. It wasn't like I was sitting there hoping someone would come and scrub my back, but I was afraid if I turned him down, he might think I was dead set against having a monkey ever scrub me down. It was a kind gesture on his part, I figured, and I certainly didn't want to hurt his feelings. So I slowly rose up out of the tub, plunked myself down on a little wooden platform, and turned my back to the monkey. The monkey didn't have any clothes on, which of course was usually the case for monkeys, so it didn't strike me as odd. The monkey seemed to be fairly old and had a lot of white mixed in with his hair. He brought over a small towel, rubbed soap in it, and with a practiced hand gave my back a good scrubbing. "It's gotten very cold these days, hasn't it?" the monkey commented. "That it has." "Before long, this place will be covered in snow, and then they'll have to shovel snow from the roofs. No easy task, believe you me." There was a brief pause, and I jumped in. "So you can speak human language?" "I can indeed," the monkey briskly replied. He was probably asked that a lot. "I was raised by humans, and before I knew it, I was able to speak. I lived for quite a long time in Tokyo, in Shinigawa." "What part of Shinigawa?" "Around Gotenyama." "That's a nice area." "Yes, as you are aware, it's a very pleasant place to live in. Nearby is the Gotenyama Gardens, and I enjoyed the natural scenery there." Our conversation took a time out at this point. The monkey continued briskly scrubbing my back, which felt great, and all the while I tried to puzzle all this out rationally. A monkey raised in Shinagawa, the Gotenyama Gardens, fluent in human speech. How was that possible? This was a monkey, for God's sakes. A monkey and nothing else. "I live in Minatoku," I said, which was basically a meaningless statement. "We were almost neighbors then," the monkey said in a friendly tone. "What kind of person raised you in Shinagawa?" I asked. "My master was a college professor. He specialized in physics and held a chair at Tokyo Gakuga University." "Quite an intellectual, then." "He certainly was. He loved music more than anything, particularly the music of Bruckner and Richard Strauss. thanks to which I developed a fondness for that myself. I heard it all the time since I was little. Picked up a little knowledge of it without even realizing it, you could say. You enjoy Bruckner? Yes, his Seventh Symphony. I always find the third movement particularly uplifting. I often listen to his Ninth Symphony, I chimed in. Another pretty meaningless statement. Yes, that's truly lovely music, said the monkey. So, that professor taught you language? He did. He didn't have any children. And perhaps to compensate for that, he trained me fairly strictly whenever he had time. He was very patient, a person who valued order and regularity above all. He was a serious person whose favorite sayings was that the repetition of accurate facts was the true road to wisdom. His wife was a quiet, sweet person and was always kind to me. They got along well, and I hesitate to mention this to an outsider, but believe me, their nighttime activities could get quite intense. Really? I said. The monkey finally finished scrubbing my back. Thanks for your patience, he said, and bowed his head. Thank you, I said. It really felt good. So, do you work here at the inn? I do. They've been kind enough to let me work here. The larger, more upscale inns wouldn't even hire a monkey. But they're always short-handed around here, and if you can make yourself useful, they don't care whether you're a monkey or whatever. Being a monkey, the pay is minimal, and they only let me work where I mostly stay out of sight, straightening up the bath, cleaning, things of this sort, since most guests would be shocked if a monkey served them tea and so on. Working in the kitchen's out too, since you'd run into issues with food sanitation law. Have you worked here a long time? I asked. It's been about 3 years. But you must have gone through all sorts of things before you settled down here. The monkey gave a brisk nod. Very true. I hesitated, but then asked him, If you don't mind, could you tell me more about your background? The monkey considered this and then said, Yes, that would be fine. It might not be as interesting as you expect, but I'm off work at 10, and I could stop by your room after. Would that be convenient? Certainly, I replied. I'd be grateful if you could bring some beer then. Understood, some cold beer it is. Would Sapporo be all right? That'd be fine. So you drink beer? A little, yes. Then please bring two large bottles. Certainly. If I understood correctly, you're staying in the Araizo suite on the second floor? That's right, I said. It's a little strange, though, don't you think? The monkey said. An inn in the mountains with a room named Araizo, rugged shore. He chuckled. I'd never in my life seen a monkey laugh before, but I guess monkeys do laugh and even cry at times. I shouldn't have been surprised since he talked too. By the way, do you have a name? I asked. No name per se, but everyone calls me the Shinigawa monkey. The monkey slid open the glass door to the bath, turned, gave a polite bow, and then slowly slid the door shut. It was a little past 10 when the monkey came to the Araizo suite, bearing a tray with 2 large bottles of beer. Like he said, I had no clue why they'd named the room Rugged Shore. Japanese inns did tend to give names to each of their rooms, but still, it was a seedy-looking room, more like a storage closet with nothing whatsoever to conjure up any element of that name. Besides the beer, the tray had a little bottle opener, 2 glasses, plus some snacks, dried seasoned squid, and a bag of kakipi crunchy snacks, some small pieces of rice crackers with peanuts. Typical bar snacks. This was one attentive monkey. The monkey was dressed now in a thick, long-sleeved shirt with I Heart NY printed on it and gray sweatpants. Probably some hand-me-down kids' clothes. There wasn't a table in the room, so we sat down side by side on thin zabuton cushions and leaned back against the wall. The monkey used the opener to pop the cap on one of the beers, and poured out 2 glasses. Silently, we clinked our glasses together in a little toast. Thanks for the drinks, the monkey said, and happily gulped back the cold beer. I drank some as well. Honestly, it felt odd to be seated next to a monkey sharing a beer, but I guess you get used to it? A beer after work can't be beat, the monkey said, wiping his mouth with the hairy back of his hand. But being a monkey, the opportunities to have a beer like this are few and far between. Do you live here at your workplace? Yes, there's a room, sort of an attic, where they let me sleep. There are mice from time to time, so it's hard to relax there, but I'm a monkey, so I have to be thankful to have a bed to sleep in and 3 square meals a day. Not that it's paradise or anything. The monkey had finished his first glass, so I poured him another. Much obliged, he said politely. Have you lived not with humans, but with your own kind? With other monkeys, I mean? I asked. There were so many things I wanted to ask him. Yes, several times, the monkey answered. His face clouded over a little. The wrinkles besides his eyes formed deep folds. For various reasons, I was driven out, forcibly, from Shinigawa, and released in Takasakiyama, Taka, Takasakiyama, the area down south famous for its monkey park. I thought at first I could live peaceably there, but things didn't work out that way. The other monkeys are my dear compatriots, don't get me wrong, but having been raised in a human household by the professor and his wife, I just couldn't express my feelings well to them. We had little in common, and communication wasn't easy. You talk funny, they told me, and sort of made fun of me and bullied me. The female monkeys would giggle when they looked at me. Monkeys are extremely sensitive to the most minute differences. They found the way I acted comical, and it annoyed them, even made them irritated sometimes. It got harder for me to stay with them, so eventually I went off on my own, turned into a rogue monkey, in other words. It must have been lonely for you. Indeed it was. Nobody protected me, and I had to scrounge for food on my own and somehow survive. But the worst thing was not having someone to communicate with. I couldn't talk with monkeys or with humans. Isolation like that is heart-treading. Takasakiyama is full of human visitors, but that didn't mean I could just start a conversation with whomever I happened to run across. Do that, and there'd be hell to pay. The upshot was, I wound up sort of neither here nor there, an isolated monkey, not part of human society, not part of the monkey's world. It was a harrowing experience. And you couldn't listen to Bruckner either. True, that's not part of my world anymore, the Shinigawa monkey said, and drank some more beer. I studied his face, but since it was red to begin with, I couldn't notice if it was turning any redder. I figured this monkey could hold his liquor, or maybe with monkeys you can't tell from their faces when they're drunk. The other thing that really tormented me was relationships with females. I see, I said. And by relations with females, you mean... To be brief, I didn't feel a speck of sexual desire for female monkeys. I had a lot of opportunities to be with them, but never really felt like it. So female monkeys didn't turn you on, even though you're a monkey yourself? Yes, exactly right. It's embarrassing, but honestly, before I knew it, I could only love human females. I was silent and draining my glass of beer. I opened the bag of crunchy snacks and grabbed a handful. That could lend to some real problems, I would think. Yes, some real problems indeed. Me being a monkey, after all, there's no way I could expect human females to respond to my desires. Plus, it runs counter to genetics. I waited for him to go on. The monkey rubbed hard behind his ear and finally continued. So, because of all of this, I had to find another method of ridding myself of these unfulfilled desires. What do you mean by another method? The monkey frowned deeply. His red face turned a bit darker. You may not believe me, the monkey said. You probably won't believe me, I should say. But I started stealing the names of the women I fell for. Stealing names? Correct. I'm not sure why, but I seem to have been born with a special talent for it. If I feel like it, I can steal somebody's name and make it my own. A wave of confusion hit me. I'm not sure I get it, I said. When you say you steal a person's name, you mean that person completely loses their name? No, they don't totally lose their name. What I steal is a part of their name, a fragment. But when I do, the name becomes insubstantial. That much lighter than before. Like when the sun clouds over and your shadow on the ground gets much paler. It depends on the person. They might not be aware of the loss. They just have a sense that something is a little off. But some do clearly realize it, right? That a part of their name's been stolen? Yes, of course. Sometimes they find that they can't remember their name. Quite inconvenient, a real bother, as you might imagine. And they don't even recognize their name for what it is. In some cases, they suffer through something close to an identity crisis. And it's all my fault, since I stole that person's name. I feel very sorry about it. I often feel the weight of a guilty conscience bearing down on me. I know it's wrong, yet I can't stop myself. I'm not trying to excuse my actions, but my dopamine levels force me to do that. Like there's a voice telling me, hey, go, steal the name. It's not like it's illegal or anything. I folded my arms and studied the monkey. Dopamine. Finally, I spoke up. And the names you're stealing are only those of women you love or sexually desire? Do I have that right? Exactly. I don't randomly steal just anyone's name. How many people's names have you stolen? With a serious expression, the monkey totaled it up on his fingers. As he counted, he was muttering something. He looked up. 7 in all. I stole 7 women's names. Was this a lot or not so many? Who could say? So how do you go about stealing names? I asked, if you don't mind telling me. It's mostly by willpower, by power of concentration, psychic energy. But that's not enough. I need something with the person's name actually written on it. An ID is ideal. A driver's license, student ID, insurance card, or passport, that sort of thing. A name tag will work too. Anyway, I need to get a hold of an actual object like that. Mostly I steal them. Stealing is the only way. As a monkey, I'm pretty skilled at sneaking into people's rooms when they're out. I scout around for something with their name on it and take it back with me. So, you use that object with the woman's name on it, along with your willpower, and steal their name? Precisely. I stare at the name written there for a long time, focusing my emotions, absorbing the name of the person I love. It takes a lot of time and is mentally and physically exhausting. I get completely engrossed in it, and somehow I'm able to pull it off. A part of the woman becomes a part of me, and my affection and desire, which up until then had no outlet, are safely satisfied. So there's nothing physical involved? The monkey nodded sharply. I know I'm just a monkey, but I never do anything unseemly. I make the name of the woman I love a part of me. That's enough for me. I agree it's a bit perverted, but it's also a completely pure platonic act. I simply possess a great love for that name inside me, secretly, like a gentle breeze wafting over a meadow. Hmm, I said, impressed. I guess you could even call that the ultimate form of romantic love. Agreed. It it may well be the ultimate form of romantic love, but it's also the ultimate form of loneliness. Like two sides of a coin. Two extremes are stuck together and can never be separated. Our conversation came to a halt here, and the monkey and I silently drank our beer, snacking on the kakipi, dried squid. Have you stolen anyone's name recently? I asked. The monkey shook his head and grabbed some of the stiff hair on his arm, as if making sure he was indeed an actual monkey. No, I haven't stolen anyone's name recently. After I came to this town, I made up my mind to stop that kind of misconduct, thanks to which the soul of this wee little monkey has found a measure of peace. I treasure the names of the 7 women in my heart and live a quite tranquil life. Quiet, tranquil life. I'm glad to hear it, I said. I know this is quite forward of me, but I was wondering if you'd be kind enough to allow me to give my own personal opinion on the subject of love. Of course, I said. The monkey blinked widely several times. His long eyelashes waved up and down like palm fronds in the breeze. He took a big, slow breath, like the kind of deep breath a long jumper takes before he starts to run. I believe that love is the indispensable fuel that allows us to go on living. Someday that love may end, or it may never amount to anything. But even if love fades away, even if it's unrequited, you can still hold on to the memory of having loved someone, of having loved or having fallen in love with someone. And that's a valuable source of warmth. Without that heat source, a person's heart, and a monkey's heart too, would turn into a bitterly cold, barren wasteland. A place where not a ray of sunlight falls, where a wildflower of peace, the trees of hope, have no chance to grow. I treasure the names of those 7 beautiful women I loved here in my heart. At this, the monkey laid a palm on his chest. I plan to use these memories as my own little fuel source I burn on cold nights to keep me warm as I live out what's left of my own personal life. The monkey chuckled again and lightly shook his head a few times. It's a strange way of putting it, isn't it? He said. Personal life. When I'm a monkey and not a person. It was 11:30 when he finally finished drinking the 2 large bottles of beer. I should be going, said the monkey. I started feeling so good I ran off at the mouth, I'm afraid. My apologies. No, I found it an interesting story, I said. Maybe interesting wasn't the right word. I mean, sharing a beer and chatting together with a monkey was a pretty unusual experience. Add to that the fact that this particular monkey loved Bruckner and stole women's names because he was driven to do so by sexual desire, or perhaps love, and interesting didn't begin to describe it. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever heard, but I didn't want to stir the monkey's emotions any more than necessary, so I chose this more calming, natural expression. We said goodbye. I handed the monkey a 1,000 yen bill as a tip. It's not much, but please, buy yourself something good to eat. At first, the monkey refused, but I insisted and he finally accepted it. He folded the bill and carefully slipped it into the pocket of his waist sweatpants. It's kind of you, very kind of you, he said. You've listened to my absurd life story, treated me to beer, and now this kind gesture. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. The monkey put the empty beer bottles and glasses on the tray and carried it out of the room. The next morning, I checked out of the inn and went back to Tokyo, but I didn't see the monkey anywhere. At the front desk, the creepy old man with no hair or eyebrows was nowhere to be seen, and neither was the aged cat with the nose issues. Instead, a fat, surly, middle-aged woman was manning the front, and when I said I'd like to pay for the additional charges for last night's beer, she said empathetically that there was no incidental charges on my bill. All we have here is canned beer from the vending machine, she insisted. We never provide bottled beer. Once again, I was confused. It felt like bits of reality and unreality were randomly clanging places. But I had definitely shared 2 large bottles of Sapporo beer with a monkey as I listened to his life story. I was going to bring up the monkey with the middle-aged woman, but decided against it. Maybe the monkey didn't really exist. And it was all an illusion, the product of a brain pickled after soaking it too long in the hot springs. Or maybe what I had seen was a long, strange, realistic dream. So if I said something like, "You have an employee who's an elderly monkey who can speak, right?" things might go sideways. In worst case scenario, they'd think I was insane. Another possibility was that the monkey was an off-the-books employee, and the inn couldn't mention it publicly, not wanting the tax office or health department to catch wind of it. A real possibility. On the train ride back home, I mentally replayed everything the monkey had told me. I jotted down all the details as best I could remember in a notebook I used for work, thinking that when I got back to Tokyo, I'd write down the whole thing from start to finish. The monkey really did exist, and that's the only way I could see it. I wasn't at all sure how much I should accept of what he had told me over beer. It was hard to judge it fairly. Was that really possible? To steal women's names and possess them yourself? Was this some unique ability that only the Shinigawa monkey was given? Maybe the monkey was a pathological liar. Who could say? Naturally, I'd never heard a monkey with mythomania before. But if a monkey could speak human language as skillfully as he did, it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility for him to also be a habitual liar. I'd interviewed numerous people as part of my work and had become pretty good at sniffing out who you could believe and who you couldn't. After someone talks for a while, you pick up some subtle hints and certain signals the man or woman sends out, and you get an intuitive sense of whether or not they're believable. And I just didn't get the feeling that what the Shinigawa monkey told me was a made-up story. The look in his eyes and his expression, the way he'd pondered things every once in a while, his pauses, gestures, the way he'd get stuck for words, nothing about it seemed artificial or forced. And above all, was the total, even painful, honesty of his confession. My relaxed solo journey over, I returned to the whirlwind routine of the city, even without any major work related assignments. Somehow, as I get older, I find myself busier than ever, and time seemed to steadily speed up. In the end, I never told anyone about the Shinagawa monkey or wrote anything about him. Why try if no one would ever believe me? People would only end up saying I was just making up stuff again. I also couldn't figure out, what format to use. It was way too bizarre to write about it as if it were real, and as long as I couldn't provide proof that is, that the monkey actually existed, no one would ever buy it. That said, if I wrote about it as fiction, it lacked clear focus or a point. I could well imagine, even before I started writing about it, my editor's puzzled expression after reading the manuscript and the question that would follow. I hesitate to ask you, since you're an author, but what's the theme of this story supposed to be? Theme? Can't say there is one. It's just about an old monkey who speaks human language in a tiny town in Gunma Prefecture, who scrubs guests' backs in hot springs, enjoys cold beer, falls in love with human women, and steals their names. Where's where's the theme in that? Or moral? And as time passed, the memory of that hot springs town began to fade. No matter how vivid memories may be, they can't win out against the power of time. But now, 5 years later, I've decided to write about it based on the notes I scribbled down in my notebook back then. All because of something that happened recently that got me thinking, if that incident hadn't taken place, I might well not be writing this. I had a work-related appointment in the coffee lounge of a hotel in Akasaka. The person I was meeting was an editor of a travel magazine. She was a very attractive woman, around 30 or so. Petite, with long hair, of lovely complexion, and large, fetching eyes. She was also quite an able editor, and still single. We'd worked together quite a few times and gotten along well. After we'd taken care of work, we sat back and chatted over coffee for a while. Her cell phone rang, and she looked at me apologetically. I motioned to her to take the call. She checked the incoming number and answered it. It seemed to be about some reservations she'd made, at a restaurant maybe, or hotel, or air flight, something along those lines. She talked for a while, checking her pocket planner, and then shot me a troubled look. "I'm very sorry," she said to me in a small voice, a hand covering the speaker. "This is a little weird question, I know, but what's my name?" I gasped, but as casually as I could, I told her her full name. She nodded and relayed this to the person on the other end of the phone. She hung up and apologized to me. "I'm so sorry about that. All of a sudden, I just couldn't remember my name, so I'm so embarrassed." "Does that happen sometimes?" I asked. She seemed to hesitate, but finally nodded. "Yes, it seems it's happening a lot these days. I just can't recall my name, like I've blacked out or something." "Do you forget other things too? Like you can't remember your birthday or telephone number or PIN?" She shook her head decisively. "No, not at all. I've always had a good memory. I know all my friends' birthdays by heart. I haven't forgotten anyone else's name, not even once. But still, sometimes I can't remember my own name. I can't figure it out. After a couple of minutes, my memory comes back, but that couple of minutes is totally inconvenient, and I panic like I'm no longer myself anymore." I nodded silently. "Do you think it's a sign of early onset Alzheimer's?" I asked. Or she asked. I sighed. "Medically, I don't know, but when did it start, these symptoms where you suddenly forgot your name?" She squinted and thought about it. "About half a year ago, I think. I remember it was when I went to enjoy the cherry blossoms and couldn't recall my name." That was the first time. This must be an odd thing to ask, but did you lose anything at that time? Some sort of ID, like a driver's license, a passport, an insurance card? She pursed her lips. She lost in thought for a while, then replied, You know, now that you mention it, I did lose my driver's license back then. It was lunchtime, and I was sitting on a park bench taking a break, and I put my handbag right next to me on a bench. I was redoing my lipstick with my compact, and when I looked over next, the handbag was gone. Couldn't understand it. I'd only looked away from the handbag for a second and didn't sense anyone nearby or hear any footsteps. I looked around, but I was alone. It was a quiet park, and I'm sure if somebody had come to steal my bag, I would have noticed it. I waited for her to go on. But that's not all that was strange. That same afternoon, I got a call from some police saying my handbag had been found. It had been set outside a police box near the park. Nothing else was missing. The cash was still inside, as were my credit cards, ATM card, the cell phone, all were untouched. Only my driver's license was gone. That was the only thing that was taken from the purse. It seemed unthinkable, and the policeman was quite surprised. They don't they don't take the cash or only the driver's license and leave the bag right outside the police box? I sighed quietly, but said nothing. This was the end of March. Right away, I went to the motor vehicles office in Samizu and had them issue a new license. The whole incident was pretty weird, but fortunately, there wasn't any real harm done. And Samizu's near work, so it didn't take much time. Samizu is in Shinigawa, isn't it? That's right. It's in Shioi. My company's in Takanawa, so it's a quick taxi ride, she said. She turned a doubtful look at me. Do you think there's a connection between me not remembering my name and losing my license? I quickly shook my head. I couldn't exactly bring up the story of the Shinigawa monkey here. If I did, she might wangle his whereabouts from me and head off to that inn to confront him face to face and grill him about what had happened. No, I don't think there's a connection, I said. It's just sort of popped into my head since it involves your name. She still looked unconvinced. I knew it was risky, but there was one more vital question I had to ask. By the way, have you seen any monkeys lately? Monkeys? She asked. You mean like the animals? Yes, real live monkeys, I said. She shook her head. I don't think I've seen a monkey for years. Not in a zoo or anywhere else. Was the Shinagawa monkey back to his old tricks? Or was another monkey using his MO to commit these crimes? A copycat monkey? Or something else? Other than a monkey responsible? I really didn't want to think the Shinagawa monkey was back to stealing names. He'd told me, quite matter-of-factly, that holding 7 women's names tucked inside him was plenty, and that he was happy simply living out his remaining years quietly in that little hot springs town. And he seemed to mean it. But maybe that monkey had a chronic psychological condition, one that alone couldn't hold in check. And maybe his illness and his dopamine was urging him to just do it. And perhaps all that brought him back to his old haunts in Shinagawa, back to his former pernicious habits. Maybe I'll try it myself sometime. On sleepless nights, that random fanciful thought comes to me sometimes. I'll filch the ID or name tag of a woman I love, set a laser focus on it, gather her name inside me, and possess a part of her all to myself. What would that feel like? No, that'll never happen. I've never been deft with my hands and would never be able to swipe something that belongs to someone else. even if that something had no physical form, and stealing it wasn't against the law. Extreme love, extreme loneliness. Ever since then, whenever I listen to a Bruckner symphony, I ponder that Shinigawa's monkey's personal life. I picture the elderly monkey in that tiny hot springs town in the attic of a rundown inn, wrapped up in a thin quilt, asleep. And I think of the snacks, the kakipi and dried squid we enjoyed, and as we drank beer together, propped up against the wall. I haven't seen the beautiful travel magazine editor since then, so I have no idea what happened with her name. I hope it didn't cause her any real hardship. She was blameless, after all. Nothing about it was her fault. I do feel bad about it, but I still can't bring myself to tell her about the Shinigawa monkey.